Alexis at the dais this
Hey,
morning.
Commissioner Jung.
Commissioner Herman,
Hi, Commissioner.
Commissioner Herman, are you on the line as well?
Yes.
Okay, all right, good morning. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I will call the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District meeting to order for Tuesday, September the 7th. It is 10 a.m. We will start with a salute to the flag. Longtime listener, first-time caller, Mr. Solero, would you lead us in the pledge this morning? And for the record, that was Mr. James Solero. Okay, that takes us to item number 2. Mr. Clerk or Madam Clerk, would you call the roll? I don't know who's calling roll this morning.
Bob Lucy, Chair, is absent. Von Hartung, Vice Chair.
Here.
Alexis Hill.
Here.
Kitty Jung via phone.
Present.
Jeannie Herman via phone.
Here, kinda.
Fire Chief Charles Moore.
Here.
Deputy District Attorney Wade Carner.
Here.
And I'm Chief Deputy Clerk Kathy Smith. So you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Chief, that takes us to item number 3, public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Public comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. The district will also hear public comment during individual action items with comment limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments are to be made to the Board of Fire Commissioners as a whole.
We have Mr. Thomas Daly up first.
Mr. Daly. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. For the record, Thomas Daly from the Estates of Mount Rose, and I was just joined by several representatives of the Arrow Creek community in the audience as well. You will hear later this morning of the need for Truckee Meadows Fire and Rescue to enhance its emergency ambulance service capability in the North Valleys as soon as possible, despite the fact that REMSA has this legal responsibility. You will also learn from Chief Moore's staff report of the discontinuation of a REMSA ambulance heretofore stationed on the Mount Rose Highway corridor. That unit has been in place for 5 years until this past April. That REMSA unit stationed on Mount Rose Highway in 2016 was to correct the dismal response time of REMSA for calls in that area and also in Pleasant Valley and the northern end of Washoe Valley. It worked. Since that time, the REMSA unit arrives faster than the Truckee Meadows engine more than half the time, a complete reversal of REMSA's previous performance. The decision to terminate that REMSA unit was made unilaterally by Dean Dow, the CEO of REMSA. There is no mention of this decision in the meeting minutes of the EMS Advisory Board, nor in the meeting minutes of the District Board of Health. Nor was there any notice given to affected communities. No community outreach. So where is the oversight? Where is the accountability? Where is the audit of this arrangement between the county and REMSA by the county auditor? They might as well be on the side of a milk carton because they are missing. The disparity in response times by REMSA permitted under this franchise agreement is government-sponsored discrimination. If you live in Verdi, South Reno, or Washoe Valley, you get second-class service from REMSA. Response times recently reported by REMSA were 6 minutes for Reno, 7 minutes for Sparks, 11 minutes for Washoe County. Anything beyond 8 minutes will turn your medical emergency into a medical fatality. We want our ambulance back, a REMSA unit on Mount Rose Highway or a TM unit at Station 36 Arrow Creek. Not 5 years from now, not next year, tomorrow. Tell Mr. Dow to put his ambulance back on Mount Rose Highway until Truckee Meadows can staff up and provide that service from Station 36. Before someone dies, do your job.
Thank you, Mr. Daly.
No one else has signed in.
Okay, is there anyone wishing to speak at this time who is not signed in? Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment, and that'll take us to item 4, Commissioners and Fire Chiefs announcements. Chief, do you have any such items?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair. A longtime employee who recently retired, Al Hyde, was a battalion chief for us, and he recently passed away after his retirement. May I ask the board for a moment of silence to remember our friend and colleague, Al Hyde?
Gladly, Chief. Thank you. Any other items, Chief?
No, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that moment. Okay, Commissioners. Commissioner Hill.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just want to say thank you to the chief and the deputy chief for keeping the commissioners informed of the Caldor fire and our operations, which we did a lot for that fire, even with the stretch resources during the Burning Man unsanctioned event. So thank you so much for the daily updates, the texts, and it just helped me to relay pertinent information to constituents, and I really appreciated our team player spirit, even though it wasn't in our jurisdiction, and that we are one Tahoe, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hill. Commissioners Jung or Herman, anything from you? Okay, hearing none. Chief, I know we had an issue with a call this weekend that was in our jurisdiction that was taken by Reno. Can we obtain the 911 records and the radio traffic recordings and other pertinent information to bring that matter before our board in October?
Yes, in fact, I'll give you just a brief overview in the chief's report if there's no
Okay,
objection from
all
legal
right,
counsel.
and that'll be fine. So consider that request. And then, Chief, what I'd like to do, well, let me start with this. I want to thank the crews for the overtime that has been put in to cover the shifts so that we could send members to Dixie and Caldor and all the other places. I'm thankful, and boy, look at the air today, a reprieve. My goodness, it matters. It really does matter. So thank you so much. I also want to thank the crews out in Spanish Springs for extinguishing the fire this morning in the pit. That's Station 46. It sounds like you guys got to that pretty quickly. And Chief, I'd like to understand how that occurred at some point. Did the compost just get too hot? Are they not turning it enough? And I'm not trying to castigate the Donovan Pit. They've run a great operation for many years, but I would like to understand that.
Okay.
And then, Chief, in the not too distant future, I would like to also understand our agreements with REMSA. Mount Rose is of course one of them. We used to have an agreement out in Wadsworth where they would staff an ambulance in Wadsworth. We have that in writing. That was a formal agreement. Do we have any such agreements for ambulances around the region, or is that in the franchise agreement? Is that completely under REMSA's purview? And if it is. I guess we just need to understand better how the system is supposed to work, where they're supposed to staff ambulances. They used to keep one in Spanish Springs. I know we're now going to cover that at taxpayers' cost, and we'll talk about that in just a little while. But I'd like to better understand that. And then one other thing from me, Chief, I've had some requests in terms of wineries, and the fact that, and this just goes directly to commercial structures. They would have 1,000 square foot tasting room, and they're going to be required to put in fire suppression. but yet for a residential unit, we don't require that. And so, and that, I know that's not a state requirement because they have them in Nye County, they have them down in Clark County and some other places. So I'd like to try to understand, and I might be wrong about Clark County because it could be in Pahrump and that could be part of Nye. But I'd like to understand how they're achieving this. And in Churchill County, I know that there's some other changes. So I don't think it's a state statute that we're dealing with, that we're bumping up against. We're bumping up against our own statute, so I'd like to understand those better.
Can I ask a clarifying
Okay?
question? Mr. Vice Chair, is there a current proposal for this winery in the district now?
There's, it's forthcoming. Yeah,
Okay.
we've got to overcome some issues. I mean, they're up against hundreds of thousands of dollars in infrastructure costs to achieve this for something that could really enhance the region. But there could be a number of them that come out. We just need to understand better why we're asking for this and is it really necessary or we're just being pedantic.
Okay.
Okay? Did I knock anything loose for anyone else? Commissioners on the phone, check your pulses.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Jung, the floor is yours.
the franchise agreement with REMSA lives with the District Board of Health. Thank you.
No, that is absolutely true, but I'd like to know what's in it. And is there something that we need to potentially change? But yes, absolutely true. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Commissioner Hill, anything else? Okay, and Commissioner Herman, nothing? All right, I will close item number 4. That takes us to consent. Is there anything that we need to look at, Chief?
Not unless the board wants to pull any items. The consent agenda is items A through F.
Okay? Commissioner Hill, Commissioner Jung, Commissioner Herman? Okay, I'll entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second,
Have a motion by Commissioner Hill, second by Commissioner Jung. Is there any public comment on consent, Madam Clerk?
There is not.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? I heard all 4. Motion carries unanimously. That takes us to item number 6, Chief. And before we get to item number 6, what I'm going to do, actually, no, let's keep going. Item number 6, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Item 6 is a recommendation to accept with thoughtful appreciation a monetary donation of $1,000 from Robert and Sheryl Fitzgerald. The check just showed up really in a plain envelope, and we didn't really know what it was for, so I contacted her, and she said she's just very grateful for the 2 fires that were above Little Valley that were lightning caused. And apparently she knew that we sent crews up there hiking about 2 hours to access those fires, and had we not, they certainly would have erupted into something fairly major. So she just wanted to express her thanks to TM for taking care of those and keeping those fires in check.
Did we write her a formal letter of thank you?
I did send her a letter of thanks, but I would propose that we author a more formal letter for the chair to sign in thanks back to her. So once the board approves this item, I will do that.
Thank you, Chief. Make it so. Okay.
Move to approve the donation.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Herman.
Okay, so I have a motion by Commissioner Hill, second by Commissioner Herman. Is there any public comment on this item, Madam Clerk?
There is none.
Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Is there any other discussion? Again, thank you so much to the Fitzgeralds. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item number 7, Chief, recommendation to approve a resolution to donate a Type 1 structure engine.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. You may recall that the town of Greenville, California was completely destroyed by fire from the Dixie Fire, including its fire station and its other critical infrastructure. The district has a surplus engine, given the fact that that fire district has lost everything. Staff's recommending that we donate this engine, and Chief Orange from from the fire district is here, if you'd like to hear from him. But we'd be very honored if we could help out that community with
Okay.
donated engine.
I'd love to hear from you, Chief, if you'd like to come up. You don't have to. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Bob Orange, and I am the fire chief for Greenville, and I'm also the board chair for the Indian Valley Community Services District, which oversees the fire department. And when the fire came to Greenville, we did lose our infrastructure, our water plant, our sewer plant,
Oh, my goodness.
sheriff's substation, library, post office, and our fire station with one apparatus included within. We're only 14 volunteers. Of the 3 volunteers, 3 of the volunteers lost their homes. Everything, one other volunteer, which is kind of a sad story in and of itself, everybody's prepared for evacuation, so he had a Suburban, and he loaded it up with everything, all his most critical items and guns, things like that nature, and then he responded to the fire, but he left his vehicle parked at the station, and then it was burned up at the station also. Then of our CSD, everybody, all the employees for the Community Service District also lost their homes. But we're, what you're offering here is just absolutely incredible to us. I mean, we have aging engines and structure. We have not had an offer from any other district or other place for an engine, replacement engine to supplement our fleet. We did get one from the OES, which is a loaner from LA that will sign right now, I guess, for a year. But I just want to thank you for consideration and an outreach to us. We've been really wiped out, and anything we can get, we're just rebuilding, and, well, not rebuilding yet, working on it, get a temporary station, then build another station down the line. But I saw that truck, it's absolutely incredible, and be honest with you, I know it would be the pride of the fleet with all the capability that's with it, and we'd appreciate any gesture to helping us out. Thank you.
Okay.
Have any questions of me?
Any questions for the chief?
No. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much,
okay,
Chief.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Chief, I do have a question for you. The estimated value of the loose equipment is $5,000. What's the loose equipment? Define that.
I believe we're donating some hose, nozzles, and just general tools that you'll find on a fire apparatus, axes, pipe poles, et cetera.
That's great, yeah. Do we periodically just, I mean, is that type of stuff that we have that we could donate in the future for assistance?
Yes, absolutely. This equipment really is at the end of life for us, and I'm sure that Indian Valley can use it for years to come.
That's great, okay. No, I'm fully supportive of this. Commissioner Hill, anything from you? Okay. Well, Chief, please accept our sincere condolences, and we're so sorry for the loss. But we're going to try to help you guys out now and coming in the future. Anything from you, Commissioners Jung or Herman?
Herman, I think it's great. One thing that Chief Moore and his top brass have always demonstrated in this entire northern Nevada and northern California region has been completely cooperation and a recognition on his part and his subject matter expertise, as well as his chief under his employ, which is, listen, fire is regional. It's not specific, and it crosses many jurisdictions. And the more of us that are in this together, the better we can have. The only product that we really give our constituents is a quality of life. So I think it's a very generous donation, and I wish we could do more, Mr. Fire Chief, and we wish you so much the best, and we're very sorry and just thankful that you got out of there alive, and we wish you the best, and we'll help in any way we absolutely can. We don't believe in jurisdictions at Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jung. Commissioner Herman?
Yes, I just second what Commissioner Jung has said. She puts it in such a nice way, and I agree with her completely. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Chief, I appreciate the collegial nature of TM and how we are always willing to help. Commissioner Hill?
I'm ready with a motion if you're ready, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please. I'm ready to entertain.
I move to approve the resolution to donate one surplus engine to the Indian Valley Fire and Rescue in Greenville, California.
Okay.
Second that, Herman.
Okay, so I have a motion by Commissioner Hill, second by Commissioner Herman. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment on this item?
There is not.
Okay, all right, seeing none, I will bring it back to the board. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Chief, that takes us to item number 8, the chief's report. The floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, I'll just go through these 1 through 5 if there's any follow-up questions in the interest of time. So we just received notice from FEMA of a grant award of about $400,000 for a volunteer coordinator and additional PPE and program development to expand and develop our volunteer program. That grant award will come back to you in October. And then in the chief's report, we did receive almost $500,000 of equipment that the board will not need to approve because it comes under the master agreement that we had with NV Energy in the state of Nevada. So pleased to announce that we've just recently, in the last few weeks, we've received almost $1 million in grant awards for the district. The fall green waste, we're beginning to make some plans for that, and we want to look at some new processes where we minimize the amount of wait time for people ready to offload. The board might recall a presentation from Bill Stewart, who used to be a TM employee who works for a company that has a horizontal grinder. So our plan is to offload the material and then use that horizontal grinder to masticate it. And hopefully we'll look at a way to transport all of that down to a green waste recycler, because I think the community's sick and tired enough of the smoke. So I want to spend a little bit of money and not burn it this year. Let's see if we can get it to a green waste recycler and avoid that. The air quality and wildfire smoke, I recently attended at the invitation of Senator Cortez Masto of all the problems we've been having with wildfire smoke. And there was a mom there who mentioned that she's a COVID long hauler and her son has all kinds of respiratory difficulties, and she doesn't have air conditioning in her home. So over time, the smoke that comes by way of those fires will eventually infiltrate into her home. So Adam Mayberry has something to show you here, but it's a MacGyver solution to improving air quality when people don't have a means to afford a full-blown HEPA filter or any kind of other device. So this is just really a $15 box fan with a filter, and it works amazingly well because I've used it in my own home. And so I won't steal Adam's thunder. I'll let him.
Go ahead. You're doing fine.
PIO MacGyver, welcome.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. I'm Adam Mayberry, Public Information Officer. As Chief Moore said, we're concerned about the health of our residents as well, as you know. So as a little bit of a departure, I took some notes here, but skies have been clear recently, as you pointed out, but we've had some very unhealthy days, very hazardous days, and so we just wanted to share with you and our residents an easy alternative. We've encouraged our residents to stay indoors, as you know, but even some of the indoor air can be very, very hazardous, even if you have central air. So air purifiers, as you might know, can go up to $800, very expensive. So this here is an inexpensive alternative. It's a box fan. I got this at Walmart for about 14 bucks, and there's a filter, a HEPA filter rating, at least a MERV rating of 13. This is a little bit on the higher end, but some of these filters you can get for as low as as low as $12. And our source, in fact, we pushed out some social media. Our source is University of Michigan Medical School. They have a short YouTube video, and some of the high-end air purification systems can take out particles, 400,000 particles per cubic foot down to 0. In this case, they've done some studies, and it can reduce those particles to about 90%. So it works, particularly for those that don't have central air. This is a real alternative for them, inexpensive. And so that's what we wanted to share with you. And next month, maybe we'll do a demonstration on how to build a jetpack with fire extinguishers.
Looking forward to that.
But thank you.
This really works. I did it in my house where I have central air, but in some levels, you could still smell the smoke. I got one of these and I turned it on full blast, and in about 2 or 3 hours, it virtually eliminated the smell. But the particles we're really concerned about are those at 2.5 microns,
Yes.
and the MERV 13 filter is important. I bought 4 of them from Amazon for $30. So between $7 and $8 per filter, and the box fan. So that's a very, very inexpensive way to improve your indoor air quality.
And note the duct tape, which was included on Apollo 13, rather, which is one of the things that brought them home. If they wouldn't have had duct tape, so who doesn't love duct tape? I tell you, that's a great unit, Chief. And at our home, we spent over $500 on air purification systems. We bought 2 from a local store, and then we bought 1 online. They're very expensive.
Indeed.
They're a little fancier, but my goodness. Okay, keep going, Chief.
All right, our fiscal officer, Cindy Vance, will have just a very brief update on where we're going to potentially finish the end of the year fiscally. We're in good shape again.
Ms. Vance, welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. Let me just get this up here, sorry. So included in your package is a year-to-date update for fiscal year 21, because we're still in the closing process. The auditors actually will start next week. But this was done as of probably about the 23rd of August of when I put it together. And we're running about $3 million over, like in the positive with our budget, where our revenues are more than expected and our expenses are also under budget. It's looking to be about 1.8 million for the ending fund balance will be bigger than what we projected the ending fund balance would be for the fiscal year 22 budget. This presentation, the fiscal review that was included did not include the C-tax for June, which we since received. We had expected, I wrote that we expected probably around 800. It was just over $1 million. Which brings our total C-tax revenues to $10,396,000, which from the original budget, when we presented and set up our fiscal year 21 budget, we had projected a low 7.8 million in consolidated taxes. This is about 33% above that. We did increase our projection when we realized we were going to collect more, and that was used for the fiscal year 22 budget. But it's still about 11% over that and about 15% increase over prior year. So it was a significant increase in consolidated taxes, even under normal conditions, let alone a pandemic. Some of the accruals, the year-end accruals that we were working on, and are mostly revenue accruals. We have a 60-day period to recognize revenues. We must collect our revenues by 60 days after year-end to record them as a revenue and a receivable in the fiscal year-end. So the accruals that will occur are some of the NV Energy reconciliations on what was billed and owed by June 30 and what was received by August 31st of the fuels programs. And then also our ambulance billings. We'll get that information from our third-party vendor. So any of the services we provided before June 30th and collected by August 31st will be accrued.
So we do expect actually mostly the accruals will be revenue-based. And there is a reconciliation for the salaries and benefits. So that will be what will hit expenses. But we're pretty close. I expect actually it to actually increase. So we'll recognize more revenues than we will additional expenses on the final accruals.
Okay.
Any questions
So
on that?
I'm just going to throw out
Okay.
a word of caution to us, Chief. The C-tax, it's a windfall, it's great.
It really is.
But that doesn't mean that it's a consistent, reliable source of income for us. It's, it's mailbox money right now. And that doesn't always last. So let's just make sure that we don't base our projections on that until we know that it's coming in. But, property taxes are one thing, but C-taxes, it can be very variable just depending on the health and the state of the economy itself.
And the state does provide the consolidated tax projections for the budget years. We do use those, and even in other times, we've always been fairly close to that projection. So our budget for fiscal year '22 was based on state projections.
Okay.
And so not an overly aggressive budget based on the current year collections.
Yeah, well, cash is
Hopefully
king.
continues,
There's
yeah.
nothing like money in the bank. That's my opinion. Commissioner Hill, anything? Commissioners, either Herman or Jung, do you have anything for Ms. Vance?
Great job as always, Miss Vance.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, hearing nothing else, Chief. Thank you, Ms. Vance.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Finally, the wildfire update. I'd like to give you a summary of fires that we had this very busy Labor Day weekend. I texted you a 5-acre fire on Cold Springs in BLM jurisdiction. Thanks to aircraft, we got a handle on that pretty quick. Simultaneously to that fire was a mattress on fire on Peavine Road, which I have no idea other than probably an act of arson why that would catch fire. You're aware of the Donovan pit fire this morning. That will likely produce a column of smoke for a few hours. So Mr. Mayberry has texted the media to ask people not to call 911 on that. It will be smoldering for a while. And then we had a structure fire this Saturday where there are some problems that I need to bring before the board. This fire was reported to 911. The location was somewhat vague, but as things narrowed down, it looks like that there was a 6-minute window of time for TM to get, well, in fact, we were never notified on this. So the fire was 10 doors down from Station 33. I mean, you could walk there in 6 minutes. But only because the station captain was able to see the fire from the kitchen, which he walked into, I guess, for a cup of coffee or lunch, saw the column of smoke. So we had no notification from 911, although we do know that Reno Ecom had some calls on a report of smoke about 6 minutes earlier than that. So the captain responded then, of course, and arrived on the scene to find a fire in the attic of this residence. And then shortly after that, Reno Fire was coming in behind us. So somewhere in that 6 minutes, there is some notification to Reno Fire, but not to us. So as you mentioned earlier, Mr. Vice Chair, that I need to do some digging into what happened here, because we cannot have notification delaying a response by 6 minutes. And in fact, that 6 minutes would have been a lot longer had the station captain not even gone into the kitchen. So I need to find out what the circumstances were regarding this, and what comes to mind right now, again, is this inefficient and inaccurate dispatch system that we have with Reno Ecom and Sparks and with Washoe County. But let me say this, that had this fire been similar between us and the city of Sparks, there would have been no delay, because we have agreements in place, we have processes in place, particularly within dispatch, that both agencies both the City of Sparks Fire and TM would have been dispatched almost immediately within one another. But unfortunately, with our current agreements with the City of Reno, that doesn't happen. So I do want the board to understand what did happen here, so that if there's additional follow-up with Reno City Council at some point, that we can we can finally make some progress on this inaccurate and inefficient dispatch processes that exist. This was an automatic aid zone and with TM and the City of Reno, but there's no reason in the world, given the technology we have and a simple policy decision, could fix this. Again, I will dig into this and bring it back to the board for more study in October.
So again, Chief, I'd like you to obtain 911 records, radio traffic recordings, and other pertinent information, and bring that back to us in October. My question is this: is this a failing of dispatch, of the sheriff's office dispatch, or how, where did the call come in originally? And you don't have to answer this question right now. Where did the call come in originally? How was it routed? And then what I'd like to know is, will the new system that we're setting up with where REMSA dispatches us, will it be solved with that? Those are my questions. Commissioner Hill, anything? Commissioners Jung or Herman?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you covered all of my questions as well.
Okay. Commissioner Herman?
The same.
Okay, thank you so much. Anything else, Chief?
That concludes my report.
Okay. All right. So that takes us, that's not for action, it's for discussion only, but is there any public comment on this item? Okay.
There is not.
Okay, very good. That takes us then, Chief, to item number 9. Before we do item number 9 for commissioners, I'm going to propose a block vote if you so desire. Chief, I would propose that we put items 11, 13, 14, 15, and 16 into a block vote. Let me repeat those. Items 11, 13, 14, 15, and 16. And if the commissioners, if you find that to be suitable, I will entertain a second on that motion.
Mr. Chairman, just
Yes.
a question. On
Yes.
item 11, would that be taken with item 9 and 10?
That's, it assumes, and good point.
But I'm fine with everything but item 11. Maybe we take 9, 10, and 11 together.
We
I don't
can
know
do
if that's
that. Yep.
appropriate.
Okay,
But I'm happy to make a motion if you're okay
yeah, we're
amending that.
gonna need to, purchase ambulances kind of no matter what, but okay, we can pull item 11 out. So that's item 13, 14, 15, and 16.
One more
Move-
time, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
13, 14, 15, 16. And then I'll open 9, 10, and 11 all at once. We'll take separate motions, but they all somewhat pertain to each other. Although I thought that we were going to, purchase the ambulances sort of no matter what, as a matter of course. Okay, so I have a motion, and I have a second.
Second?
Okay, so commissioners, are you okay with that? Commissioners Jung and Herman?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all right, so Chief, if you will read items 13, 14, 15, and 16, then we will take public comment on any of those items and move on.
Mr. Vice Chair, item 13 is a recommendation to accept subgrant funding from the Nevada Division of Forestry to create defensible space fuel break around the Rolling Hills community in South Washoe County. And if accepted, approve a resolution accepting the subgrant funding and direct staff to make the necessary budget adjustments. Item 14 is a recommendation to award a professional services agreement to TSK Architects for the Station Number 37 Remodel Addition Project to complete design of a new apparatus bay, shop areas, office, and residence remodel in the amount of $295,650. The funding for this project is from the district's capital funds project. Item 15 is a recommendation to approve a transfer of $800,000 from the general fund to the emergency fund for the purpose of funding emergency event costs, pending receipt of state and local reimbursement, and if approved, approve a resolution to augment the fiscal year 2021-2022 emergency fund budget and direct the district to make the appropriate budget adjustments. And item 16 is discussion and direction to staff regarding events for the district's 50th anniversary and authorize the fire chief to execute a contract and pay a $10,000 deposit for facility rental at the Peppermill Resort Hotel for a fireman's ball on December 2nd, 2022.
Okay, thank you, Chief. We have a motion, we have a second. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on items 13, 14, 15, or 16?
We have none.
Okay, I will close public comment and bring it back to the board. We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Commissioners. That takes us back to item 9, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open item 9, 10, and 11. So, Chief, if you would read those 3 items first. We will take separate motions, but I think they all pretty much pertain to each other.
Mr. Vice Chair, item 9 is a recommendation to approve a 5-year agreement between REMSA and Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District to allow Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District to respond to and provide ambulance transport services within the REMSA franchise service area. Item 10 is a recommendation to create 12 additional firefighter paramedic positions which can be permanently underfilled as a firefighter EMT if necessary to allow for ambulance staffing, and to approve a restructured firefighter paramedic district staffing plan for 63 firefighter paramedic positions, which includes 3 existing grant-funded positions, 48 existing firefighter paramedic positions, and 12 new flexibly staffed firefighter paramedic EMT positions. Item 11 is a recommendation to approve the purchase of 2 new ambulances from Braun Northwest Incorporated to provide ambulance transport services in an amount not to exceed $195,000 each, or $390,000 total, utilizing existing HGAC contract pricing.
Okay, all right, thank you, Chief.
Vice Chair Hartung,
Yes, ma'am.
I have some documents to pass out to the board,
Please.
which have been posted online.
Okay, would you pass those out right now, Madam Clerk? Thank you. Okay, Chief, we have all 3 of those open. Chief Kukulis, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Good morning. Again, for the record, Alex Kukulis, Deputy Fire Chief. I'll try and do a quick flyover of all these pieces.
Hold on, Chief. Can you guys, I don't know, somebody either needs to mute or cover your mics, please? Thank you, thank you. Proceed, Chief.
All right. And Aaron Abbott from REMS is here also, so when we're done here, if there's any questions for him, he's happy to help answer or present. So quick background on where we're at and how we got here. So we've somewhat been in the ambulance business for many years. Down in Washoe Valley is kind of where things started. We've been providing intermittent transports with Medic 30 out of the Bauer station for quite some time, but realistically that was a small area in the south end of Washoe Valley, and primarily when REMSA or Carson City wasn't available. However, this past year, the end of 2020, given the pandemic and other circumstances, we were asked by REMSA to coordinate with them and try and enhance some of those services. And so we started picking up a greater call volume in Washoe Valley, and we also placed an additional ambulance in service in Sun Valley. That started somewhat part-time, and then towards the end of the year, we took over via mutual aid agreement, primary transport role in Sun Valley. That arrangement was originally planned to go through March 31st of this year. However, as we approached that period of time, realistically the pandemic hadn't resolved, nor some of the other contributing factors. And we were also starting to see that this was sort of a mutually advantageous arrangement. So we agreed to extend it up and through this period of time. So we've had a lot of staff conversations with REMSA. I do want to say there's been a ton of collaborative conversations, both with Aaron Abbott, Paul Burton, and several other of his staff members, and of course Joe Cameron, Chief Kettering on our side. So this has been in the works for quite some time, doing a really deep dive on whether this was an appropriate venture to recommend to the board, which we do believe that at this time it is. Some of those benefits to the district, obviously the direct benefit and first and foremost is to the public that we serve. We are able to get that ambulance there in a faster amount of time, given that REMS's focus has had to be back at the core of the city where a lot of the increase in call volume has been experienced. On top of that, because these ambulances are cross-staffed with Truckee Meadows fire personnel who are fire and EMS trained and qualified, when we do have a structure fire or other event, they can respond to that if they're not already tied up on a medical incident. So, for example, we run a 3-person engine company in Sun Valley. Now with a 2-person ambulance, if they're all there, they're responding to that structure fire with a crew of 5, making a much more aggressive attack on those fires or whatever the incident type is, vehicle accident, you name it. So we see that that's a real enhancement of services to the district and the constituents we serve. It's also a benefit to REMSA in the sense that it relieves them of the responsibility of having to focus resources out there, and they can then align those back with the rest of the city. So there's also an arrangement here that if this goes forward, and as we've been doing it for several months, that there's oftentimes simultaneous calls in Sun Valley or any of our district. We could have 2 or 3 calls stacked up sometimes. There was calls, we had a structure fire up in Sun Valley a couple months back where the medic unit was assisting with fire suppression operations, so we weren't available to provide the medical transports during that period of time. Not only did REMSA come provide fire standby on the fire, they then handled 2 or 3 subsequent medical calls at the same time. So they're still there to back us up, and then of course, when the city's becoming overwhelmed, such as even this morning, we're sending our medic units into the cities to assist them as well. So there really is a reciprocal relationship here. It's worth noting that a lot of the analysis that we did had to be initially done internally. We did contract with a third-party consultant. It's AP Triton. That was the handout that was just given and posted to the agenda last week. But our internal analysis, really what we were trying to focus on is we understood the operational benefits of this, but fiscally, how would it work out? And there's primarily 2 mechanisms here. There's the payer mixes of insurance, that's Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance. Those are the direct billings that we've been billing for now this entire year. And there's also GEMT, Ground Emergency Medical Transport, which is it's a somewhat complicated Medicaid offset that's only reimbursed once a year. At the end of the fiscal year, we submit a report to Medicaid, and there's a lot of indirect and direct costs that are accumulated with that, and then paid back to offset all those Medicaid transports that were paid at a lower rate. Effectively, when you put all those things together, our internal analysis said that we would probably be able to run this program at least cost neutral. There may even be some added revenues that will offset other medical services that we provide through the district. It's worth noting that there's no suggested increase taxes for the district to provide this, and it's not coming out of the district's current tax revenues. So that's a win in our eyes. And so I think the other 2 items that we have before you then are tied to this. So the proposal to staff the medic unit in Sun Valley as well as the medic unit in Spanish Springs would be the expansion of this program. That requires 6 personnel per ambulance, so a total of 12 new employees. Our proposal at this point is that the medic unit in Washoe Valley Medic 30 continue to be cross-staffed with the engine staffing. That's somewhat because of the lower call volume down there. We do anticipate that at a point in the future that would be worth staffing independently as well. It's just, it would be a struggle for us to try and hire 18 people right now, on top of some other attrition we have. So running a group through an academy and training all at once of that size would be difficult, but that is part of the future plans. And then the ambulances, there's 2 additional ambulances contemplated in the other agenda item here. And that's one to provide the ambulance for Spanish Springs. It doesn't currently have one. And then retire one of our old 2005 model ambulances that we had inherited from Incline several years back that needs to be surplused. So that second unit will allow all 4 ambulances that the district would operate to be within a few years old. And then final kind of background, just to put it in perspective here, I just had this data run this morning, but in the past 90 days, well, June 1st to September 1st, Medic 45 has run 604 calls and approximately 400 transports. So they're running about 6.77 calls a day. Medic 30s run 147 calls and 80 transports, so about 1.63 a day. So you can see kind of why we prioritized Sun Valley. We anticipate the Spanish Springs call volume is going to be closer to that of Sun Valley, a little bit less, but then again, it may augment some of that call volume that Sun Valley's been running to, because Sun Valley's been running over to Spanish Springs quite a bit of late. And then again, there's simultaneous calls in Sun Valley. So we do believe that those two units will sort of reciprocally assist each other. Aside from that, I'll leave it there and take questions.
Okay, I have a bunch of questions, but Commissioner Hill, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on the fiscal side, first of all, this is, I think, a good proposal, you know, except for just a few details. And I think that this will be good overall for Washoe County. So I appreciate this, as Commissioner Jung said before, the regional approach that the leadership team takes on this. But why are we trying to move forward with the contract before we have the ARPA monies from the county guaranteed? I know that goes before the BCC. I just was wondering on the timing and why we need this agreement today and why we can't wait till October.
Thank you for the question. Realistically, one of the most pressing issues there was the recruitment of the staff required to do this. We do participate in the Regional Fire Academy of Carson City East Fork. There's several southern agencies. That's scheduled to start in mid-October, and doing the backing up from that to hire people, put them through backgrounds, physicals, and have them give their notice. We're really kind of up against the gun to get them started now in that process. Otherwise, if we miss that window of opportunity, there really isn't the ability to run them through an academy and get the training they need until the earliest would be spring of next year, which would be the start date. They wouldn't be out of that until summer, sometime of 2022, again, at the earliest. So it really does have to do with the staffing component primarily.
Okay, thank you for that. And then just looking at if we do use our general funds to staff this and then eventually get reimbursed, we've looked at the fact that we're not being reimbursed quite yet for our services to other fires, and calculated all of that together on what the budget will look like.
I'll bring Cindy up, but I do think that's all been taken into consideration together. But.
Hi, Cindy Vance for the record, yes. We did take that into consideration. We do have for the emergency fund, there is 1.8 million out for receivables. Expect that we're working on moving those collection times up and working with staff for different ideas on how we can make sure the bills go out and get collected. That fund can only have 1.5 million in it, so those collections, since we are funding it with some transfers, will actually end up going back to the general fund. We did also meet with the state on transfers if we needed to fund it through our current, basically cash balance in the general fund. We can. The transfers do not count as a violation of the budget, a budget violation. So it would be it's a higher transfer than we would expect, and we will need to start a new fund for this program. With the expected 1.8 additional would be more than enough to cover this until the collections come out, and we wouldn't expect collections to come in until probably the end of fiscal 22. We might get some for this fiscal year.
And the 1.8 additional, you're talking about the end of this fiscal year that we're expecting?
That is the additional revenues and lower expenses than what we projected we would start fiscal year 22 with.
Okay.
And that's an available augmentation, and it is additional ending fund balance that we did not include in fiscal year 22's budget. So even funding this program with that additional monies, we would still suspect to end at the same ending fund balance as we included in the budget.
Okay, thank you for that. I just have one more question to the public commenter, and I'm sure that the chairman also was going to ask this, but he had a concern about the turnaround time to the Washoe Valley ambulance and how it would take longer for TM versus a REMSA that was dedicated at Mount Rose. Do you have any details to speak to that?
I'll touch on it real quick from how we would respond to those
Okay.
incidents, and then it's probably appropriate for Aaron Abbott to describe how REMSA would respond to those areas. But our Medic 30 is at Bowers Station, Station 30, so that Mount Rose corridor would be on the far reaches of what would be an acceptable response time from them. Predominantly, that's not one of the areas that we're describing as serving with that unit right now. That Washoe Valley area would include predominantly Pleasant Valley, East and West Washoe Valley, and some of the edges of Galena Forest up through where Station 39 is, Joy Lake Road. So yes, they do respond up into the Mount Rose corridor if the REMSA resources are unavailable and closer, if they're not closer. So it would be a distant response time for us, but I'll let him describe too how their staffing pattern and posting pattern
Thank you.
moves.
Good morning, Vice Chair and Commissioners. For the record, Aaron Abbott, Executive Director of Operations for REMSA. In response to your question, Commissioner Hill, and the public comment made earlier, REMSA has and essentially always has posted based on demand. And so we have fairly sophisticated, since the early 2000s, software programs that help us do predictive analytics based on historical call volume to help decide where to place next available ambulances. We did have the 24-hour station, which was explicitly bid and staffed for a period of time for about the last 5 years down at Mount Rose Highway and Wedge. The removal of that really came because of a safety issue. Those ambulances, when they are the closest, most appropriate resource to be handling a 911 call anywhere within the franchise area, they would respond to that area. So we've never had ambulances dedicated to certain very specific geographical areas, meaning we won't not send an available ambulance to a 911 call just because they're not within an invisible boundary, if that makes sense. As the COVID-19 pandemic progressed, hospital systems became very overwhelmed. Our 911 call volume has increased dramatically. I haven't looked at the August numbers yet, but we responded to 800 additional incidents in the month of July over May. So in 2 months, we're responding to 800 more 911 calls per month. We've had significant hospital delays for offload times at the hospitals. They're challenged with bed availability, staffing, et cetera. And what that does is our ambulances consistently get drawn into the core because that's where the hospitals are stationed. When we transport someone to a hospital and we're sitting on a wall, managing the care of that patient for several hours before we're able to give a nurse report, that makes our ambulances out in the rural, semi-rural, and rural areas that Truckee Meadows Fire and Rescue predominantly serves more and more difficult for us to get out to. We had our 24-hour stations removed out of our plan, our staffing plan, several months ago, and the reason for that is because they were extremely fatigued. It was a major safety issue for us. In fact, we took all of our 12-hour shifts even and made them 10 hours because we're trying to limit the fatigue factor on our staff. We're trying to, right now, play the long game in all of this, but our hospital system, our emergency medical services systems across the nation right now are at a tipping point. And that's where some of those decisions came from. I would also say too that that posting location is not out of our plan. When we have demand in that area, historical call volume demand, and available ambulances, we do post down along that Mount Rose corridor still. That has never changed. And we have recently moved our level 2 posting assignment down Virginia Street down at Virginia Longley, although that's still quite a ways from the Arrow Creek area, in combination with Medic 30 that we've been partnering with Truckee Meadows Fire and Rescue on. We've been able to split the difference in a lot of areas. So we're playing with a finite amount of resources, unfortunately, today. That doesn't mean that won't change, and we hope that it does change in the near future.
Great, that's helpful. So it shows how important this partnership would be to servicing the far out areas in unincorporated Washoe County.
Absolutely.
That's it, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill.
I may add just one comment too. It's in the staff report, of course, and the agreement, but this is a starting point with this agreement. It's what we thought we could do today, given our resources, and actually we can't even do all this today. This is with the improved positions and growth. But there is the contemplation in the agreement that we can expand where TM's going to service if it's mutually agreed upon between TM and REMSA. So that area, the Arrow Creek Foothill Station, is on our radar as a future opportunity for us to put another additional ambulance down there if it works with REMSA's posting pattern. Other areas that are probably front of mind are Cold Springs right now is another area that's hard to reach. So we just really have to phase this thing in. We don't think we can do it all in one fell swoop.
Okay. Commissioners Jung or Herman, questions?
Herman, just I think it's an amazing thing what's going on with all the planning for our fire. They've been overtaxed and overpushed and in every direction, and I have to compliment the chief and everyone that's involved and let you know that I'm very proud to be on this board and be able to understand all the things that you have to go through. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jung, before.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it was a great staff presentation. I'm ready to move forward.
Okay,
Thank you.
Hold on just a second. Chief Moore, I have you signed in, and then I'll go.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just wanted to emphasize for the record, again, this is a cost-neutral impact to the district's budget. The cost, the tax-paying citizens aren't subsidizing REMSA. And my compliments to Chief Kukulis and Chief Kamen and his staff. We've studied this in depth for the last 4 months, and we're supremely confident that this is revenue and expense neutral.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Jung, I have you signed in again.
No, I'm not signed in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, I apologize. Okay, we'll go ahead and knock that off. Thank you. So I've got a couple of questions. So let's start south and then we'll work our way north. Washoe Valley, we have an ambulance there, and I know that we were going to replace that ambulance at some point. I think we approved that, and I thought we were going to add some more rescues, but it's all good. So that ambulance will not be staffed. That'll just sit there with our 3-person company, correct?
It is operational. It's running calls right now as we speak. So to be clear, so first of all, the ambulance, to specify the ambulance versus the crew, we've purchased 2 new ambulances in recent years. So currently there's a 2018 model running there and
Okay.
a brand new one we just put in service last month up in Sun Valley. So those 2 are in good condition. The old one in disrepair that I mentioned is in reserve status. As far as it being operational, it is being operated by the 3-person engine crew. So similar to how we cross-staff a brush truck, there's not separate crews for the engine and the brush truck. They switch over to the piece of apparatus that's needed at the time of the call. So what effectively happens is when Medic 30 is requested either to our own incident or anywhere really that they're responding to, at least 2 of the crew members from Engine 30 jump onto the ambulance and respond to an incident. It may be all 3, depending on the severity of the call type. If one's left behind, they either staff our water tender or become like an additional command asset to us. So it is operational and responding to quite a few calls.
Okay. All right. And then the Sun Valley. So let's talk about the Sun Valley unit, and then we'll get to Spanish Springs. Will the Sun Valley ambulance be responding to Reno calls?
Yes, it will occasionally. I mean, that's not the intent of it, but of course, when there's a call, a 911 call, if there's no other available resources, then we make ourselves available like mutual aid, like we would for a fire or anything else.
Okay.
But its primary role, and the maps are defined in the staff report, but is Sun Valley proper. And so we've asked REMSA that we will handle all priority types within Sun Valley. Outside of Sun Valley, we really only want to go on life-threatening emergencies as a mutual aid request to REMSA, but into the cities.
But a piece of Sun Valley, Chief, is in the city of Reno, the southern portion.
What the public would consider Sun, when we talk Sun Valley, we talk about our district, which is the vast majority, but you
Okay.
are correct down there by Dantini Boulevard.
Yeah, because when
itself.
people are, I mean, if you talk about Sun Valley, people do not, there's no distinction between, the southern portion and the northern portion, whether it's in the city of Reno or not. They don't care who's showing up. They just want somebody to show up. So I'm wondering if there's going to be an issue in terms of us responding. So, Mr. Abbott, I mean, I'd be happy to hear from you. And so I'll ask the next question with respect to Spanish Springs. Define Spanish Springs. Because, Spanish Springs used to be the whole valley. Now we consider everything north of La Posada, sort of west of Pyramid Highway. And although, there's going to be some new stuff down off of Eagle Canyon, there's the whole Five Ridges project that is going in, which two of our forces can strike that pretty easily, both 45 and 46. But what about the stuff south of La Posada?
So to define the areas, if in the agreement itself, in the exhibits A's, it's pages 1 through 5, there's maps that they are specific to what is TM's jurisdictions.
Yeah, no. Look, I get the maps and I saw all of that stuff, but that has nothing to do with a call. If REMSA's not available, what happens, Alex? What happens? That's
They
what I
will
want
call
to know.
us, but I'll let Aaron explain that, but we do get called on those regularly.
Yeah, so this, actually, your question, Vice Chair, really speaks to this idea of regionalization that I've heard several times. So the one agency in this county that is agnostic to jurisdictions is REMSA. This contract is with REMSA under the REMSA franchise agreement. And so what we've agreed to through a lot of discussion and analysis is that primarily the vast majority of these calls are going to Truckee Meadows within Truckee Meadows Fire and Rescue's jurisdiction, right? So that serves the taxpayers of those jurisdictions well. But we do recognize that there are other calls that could be across the street, right? We see this a lot of times. And everyone is sitting here, well, whose jurisdiction is that? REMSA doesn't, we're essentially agnostic to that. And so what we do under this agreement is request Truckee Meadows Fire under a mutual aid agreement. That mutual aid agreement has existed for, I want to say, probably 8 years or so now, for quite some time. And that mutual aid agreement structure is still in place, even under this agreement. And so if it is a matter of a Truckee Meadows Fire and Rescue ambulance resource being across the street, down the street, and closest, most appropriate ambulance to that patient having that medical emergency, then we request mutual aid and we dispatch.
Yeah, no, and that's
Truckee
what I
Meadows.
want. I mean, I
Yeah.
obviously, I'm not, and so the suggestion is not the exclusion of things that are south of La Posada. It's the inclusion of that, as a matter of fact, because if someone is having a life-threatening emergency and they're down in Wingfield Springs and you guys can't get to them, I mean, I want us to be able to respond to that, but I don't want to have these jurisdictional boundaries sort of get in the way and not just with REMSA. While I recognize the lack of boundary that REMSA has, I also recognize that Sparks has a different response time than Washoe County in the unincorporated. So those are, and it's always been a little disconcerting. This goes way back before you. This is a long issue that I've had in terms of those boundaries and where, and I believe they were called best effort boundaries in the past.
Well, yeah.
So.
I'm sorry.
No, so those are my concerns with that, but I still have some more questions.
Well, just to kind of close that up, the bottom line is if there's an emergency and we're available and we're closest and we get the request, we will go. And that's how we've been doing things since this program's been in place, especially up in Sun Valley and in the future here in Spanish Springs. And realistically, as we make this migration over to REMSA being our dispatch center, this is going to get even more simple because we will be part of their AVL system on the same maps. They'll instantly be able to identify that our unit's closer than their unit, and that whether it's automatic through this agreement or whether it's an automatic mutual aid request, we roll the resources all the same.
Okay, and how about priority of calls?
Will we have, is that the question?
So are we going to respond to priority 2s and 3s?
We will respond to all priorities in our district.
Okay.
We will respond definitely without hesitation on priority 1s and 2s
Okay.
in the cities and outside of our district. But even on 3s, I mean, that's a determination that the battalion chief needs to make. We're trying to strike a balance here too, because we're seeing our resources, again, they run 48-hour shifts to continuously run them into the city. And then,
Yeah.
like Aaron mentioned, there's been lots of times lately where they get stuck at the hospitals because they can't offload the patient onto a hospital bed. They can be there for 4 to 6 hours in some cases. So if we send our unit with a priority 3 patient in that circumstance, we've lost it for that period of time.
Okay.
So we're cautious about those.
So let me back up a little bit here, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be, I have so many questions, but I do. So what happens post-COVID? What happens when that call volume starts to taper off, as we saw it taper off in the last? What happens? What do we, when you don't have to wait at the hospital for 4 to 6 hours to offload a patient, when you can get back on that, I mean, look, I've had very sick family members in the past, and I learned a long time ago, my wife and I, when our daughter was in kidney failure, we never walked in the front door. We always called an ambulance, because you could get in almost immediately, and it was very crucial for us, because if our daughter's blood pressure at one point was 224/196, and the physician that I was on the phone with, he started talking very calmly to me, get her there now, because they needed to start emergency dialysis to start pulling fluid off to get her blood pressure down. Point is how do we deal with this post-COVID, and when those call volumes start to drop off and become more normal, if there is such a thing?
I think you want to hear from Aaron too, but I'll just tell you we welcome that day, right? Call volumes were increasing year over year anyway. They've just spiked somewhat dramatically in the last 18 months. But as far as this arrangement goes and the necessity for it, we did go back and look at 3 years worth of data as far as call volume as well as anticipated revenues. And so we did see that we wanted to take into account pre-COVID versus in COVID to make sure that this wouldn't suddenly get us upside down.
Here's the reason why I asked this question, Chief, is if the numbers fall off, and look, you guys know that I've always been very pro-rescue. I love the idea. I've called them flex crews forever. Would we always transport, or would we hand that transport off to REMSA if the call volumes were somewhat normal, and then we treat it more like a rescue?
It's always an option to transfer the patient, but it does, the transport times aren't so far from Sun Valley and Spanish Springs that sometimes that just causes an added delay in getting that patient to definitive care at the hospitals.
Okay.
Is it an option? Yes, and we do that in some of the outlying areas, like Gerlach hands off to Pyramid Lake, or Pyramid Lake to REMSA, so that you can get those resources back. So that is an option. That would, of course, change the financial assessment, because only one agency can bill for an ambulance transport. So if we initiate a transport and hand it to
Right.
REMSA halfway, we won't be collecting anything on that.
Well, that's the point, now, isn't it? If REMSA's call volumes start to fall, who gets to transport, and does it become an arm wrestle with REMSA, because REMSA needs the revenues also?
So I appreciate the question. So I'll answer your question directly, and then I'll maybe try to extrapolate what we're seeing forecasting-wise. The decision to transport and continue transport under this agreement lies with Truckee Meadows. So in those areas that we've essentially subcontracted for those services for,
Okay,
those are
Okay.
theirs to keep. We would never arm wrestle for those.
that answers the question.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And I just as Deputy Chief Kukla said, we welcome the day that there's some normalization that occurs. We don't know when that will be. We do know that our community is accessing 911 almost agnostically to, COVID's caused an additional factor, But the 911 utilization in our community is continuing to grow, and I believe will continue to grow. The consensus among the country, among EMS services and providers, is that it's not going to just suddenly stop or slow down. We may have a slowing of the increase, but it's not going to just abruptly stop and return to
No, I
pre-COVID
didn't
levels.
think that there was going to be,
No.
sort of a hard edge. No, that wasn't the inference at all. But, okay. One last question, and forgive me, board. How are we going to restock these ambulances with supplies and drugs and et cetera? I know, I thought I saw a $28,000 a year number in there somewhere. Is that?
Yeah, that was the estimation of, with the added call volume. We've had in place some time now a resupply agreement with REMSA, so the engines can resupply on scene
Right.
from ambulances, but the REMSA's, you still call them VSTs?
Yeah.
Aaron can chime in, but they effectively restock us. We use their
No, I
bulk
know that. I know
purchasing
that that's how
arrangements.
it's happened in the past. I'm fully aware of how it occurred in the past. That's why I'm asking about this ambulance now, because ambulances, you guys go back to, home base and get restocked there. So how does that occur for us?
Yeah, it actually, so it occurs the same way it always has. You're familiar with that. We do see that because REMSA's home station is on Mill Street, just a few miles down from Renown Medical Center, that it's not uncommon that after a run, Medic 45 actually swings
Right.
by our logistics department, and we restock an ambulance, and then they
Okay.
get back into service.
Yeah,
So
it's
it
over
actually-
on, you guys are still on Edison, aren't you? Aaron?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, sir. So just by way of convenience and location, that's been happening,
Okay,
because there has been an increased calls logistically taken on by
okay,
Truckee Meadows.
all right. And then just a comment, no more questions. I am a little concerned about asking Washoe County for those recovery funds for a year. If you came to Washoe County and asked for a loan, I can understand that, but you have to remember, we're county-wide, and Washoe County is. TM is not. And so I get a little concerned, but we'll have that conversation another day. Did I knock anything loose? Commissioner Hill?
You did, actually, on your questions about the drop-off on calls. I was thinking, and this may be a discussion for another day, but what is our relationship with the implementation of 988? Are we actively engaged in those discussions, and will TM be a part of that process once we initiate that program?
Well, as we're transitioning dispatch, again, I'll let Aaron talk on the plans with that, if you have any information.
Yeah, so there is a lot of moving parts with 988 right now. There is nothing concrete, including on the public side. So the primary PSAPs capturing those initial 911 calls do have an opportunity, and in fact is currently happening at the city of Reno as a test to actually get those behavioral health calls to a crisis call center, so that we're not responding emergency resources to mental health issues. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, ambulances, paramedics, firefighters, we're not trained or designed well, even though we seem to adapt pretty well to mental health emergencies. They really need mental health professionals. And so there is an emphasis right now happening at the city of Reno where they're transferring people to the crisis call center. The implementation of 988 as the national crisis call line for mental health and behavioral health emergencies will add an additional element. And the hopes is that those patients will have a significant resource that they can access through 988 without having to call 911 first. And so the opportunity would be that if the public was well educated on it and you were experiencing a mental health or behavioral health emergency, you would dial 988 instead of 911. And there would be more appropriate resources to send to that person if they can't manage that person over the telephone. It's going to be a fantastic program. My hope is that we can market it as aggressively and as effectively as we did with 911 back in the 1980s, and get people calling 988 every time there's a mental health crisis going on, because they're going to get better service.
And with that implementation, looking at other jurisdictions and talking to other folks in the EMS business, do you see that there's still a projection of we're still going to be busy no matter what, whether mental health calls are rerouted because we may still be going out to those anyway, or.
I think and I know this is getting a little bit into the ethereal plane, but I think emergency medical services in general is going to evolve to have specialty care that actually meets those very special needs.
Right.
And mental health is just one of those. We're seeing a lot of other types of calls, requests for service that aren't necessarily medical emergencies, but there's not a better resource to respond to. And so we continue to try to evolve our services to try to meet those demands.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Just a
thank you.
quick aside on that, I know Washoe County, even though it's kind of started with Reno, Washoe County right now, even with us, is testing that and evaluating it, transferring those calls. So we're kind of in an interim period right now where we primarily don't go in on those calls anyway unless we have a law enforcement component to secure the scene for us. They've been increasingly not responding to those, inappropriately so. So we're trying to strike that balance right now, and we are seeing a little bit of a drop off in those, but it's really a pretty small percentage of our overall call volume.
Great question, Commissioner Hill. Thank you so much. Commissioners Jung or Herman, anything else?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Okay, and you guys know, look, I've been highly supportive and pushing on, notwithstanding the transport, but rescues. Why send $1 million engine out when I cut my finger off with the table saw and I just need someone to find it and, you know, help me get to the hospital to stitch it back on? And there's just, I mean, there's no reason to respond these large pieces of apparatus in all the calls. And as we see, to Commissioner Jung's point, and she and I have had this conversation both on and off the dais over the last many years, the silver tsunami is coming. We're there. We're seeing more and more and more senior living facilities where this type of response is really appropriate. I mean, we've talked about the call volume chiefs out in Spanish Springs, the largest, and this is not castigation of Cascade of the Sierra. It's kind of a twist there. But that's a big response area for us. We respond to them all the time, as are some of the others in Sparks, Morningstar and others for the city of Sparks. So we're seeing more of those kinds of calls. So I'm supportive of this. Okay, Commissioner Jung, I thought I heard you chiming in.
No, sir.
Okay, I apologize. All right. We do have public comment on this, so before I take three different, so Mr. DA, would you like to see three different motions? Would you like to see a motion to approve 9, 10, and then 11, or can we block them into one motion?
You can take these as a block.
Okay, very good. All right, I'll call public comment. Madam Clerk, would you call public comment for us?
Mr. Thomas Daly?
Mr. Daly? Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, for the record, Thomas Daly from the Estates on Mount Rose. 2 points on the issue of hospital capacity. Not all of it exists in downtown. Renown operates in South Meadows. A new acute care hospital will open probably beginning of next year on Longley Lane. Hospital capacity is going to increase, not decrease. And as the Vice Chair mentioned, most likely we're going to see a decrease in call volume once COVID is over. Secondly, to the point of this program, you've heard of the need based on call volume for additional ambulances in Sun Valley and Spanish Springs, as well as the need for additional ambulances based on long response times in Washoe Valley and in the Mount Rose corridor. If we have a $3 million surplus, buying a couple of ambulances is not going to put a dent in that. If the manpower is cost neutral, it doesn't matter whether you hire 12 or 24. Logistically and training-wise, that's an issue. So you'd probably need training classes that are sequential, not simultaneous. If you want to get in the queue for the spring training academy for another 12 people to staff Washoe Valley and Mount Rose Corridor, you need to get in the queue early before that class fills up. I would suggest you bring this matter back again in October to talk about expanding it further to address Washoe Valley and the Mount Rose Corridor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. I see no one else signed in. Do you have anyone else, Madam Clerk?
No, sir.
Okay. Is there anyone else wishing to speak at this time? So, and Mr. Daly knocked something loose that I had made a short note, but then I turned my page, and that is about rotation of staff, chiefs. Are these ambulance crews, are they going to be, are we going to rotate our regular staff throughout these things so that everybody gets an opportunity to spend time on these flex crews?
Yes, well, we've been staffing the Sun Valley unit. Well, it started with overtime personnel because we didn't
Okay.
hire specifically for that unit. So there was quite a bit of a rotation on it. Of late, we've assigned somewhat regular staff to it. It's worth noting too that this has also opened up new opportunities for us to collaborate with the other paramedic programs in the region, including TMCC, WNCC, and potentially REMS's own paramedic programs too. We're now running an intern on 2 of the 3 shifts in Sun Valley as a third rider on that ambulance. So it's also a recruitment tool for us. But yes, we do realize that this is, if not our busiest unit, one of the busiest units in Sun Valley anyway. And so we don't intend on having the same personnel locked into that throughout the entire year. We'll rotate personnel as needed. The battalion chiefs are also good about recognizing fatigue if they've been going constantly for 24 hours. They'll either take the unit down for a couple of hours or switch personnel out because we do have that opportunity.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm supportive of the methodology that you guys are proposing. Okay, all right. We can block these as a motion unless someone does not want to approve one piece of it. So Commissioner Hill.
I'm happy to make the block vote motion. I'm moved to approve items 9, 10, and 11.
As listed in the staff report.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion from Commissioner Hill. The first one that I heard was Commissioner Herman for a second. Is that correct, Commissioner? Did you make the second?
Yes, I did.
Okay, good. All right, so I have a motion and I have a second. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So, all right. That takes us to, thank you, commissioners, thank you, staff. That takes us to item 17, commissioners and fire chiefs announcements. Chief, do you have anything else for us today?
Mr. Vice Chair, I believe we skipped item 12.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for, oh. I apologize. You're right. Thank you so much. Chief, item 12, thank you.
This is item 12 is a recommendation to approve an agreement between the United States Forest Service and Truckee Meadows Fire for fuels reduction projects. If you'd like a presentation on this, Chief Eisenhagen is here to let you know a little bit more about what we'll be doing. Or if you would rather just approve it, it's.
Okay, so these are, so Chief, these are primarily in they call them energy zones or energy corridors, so those electrical corridors. Are we still dealing with that, or will this extend onto private property?
This is separate, so our NV Energy August Eisenhagen for the record, Division Chief. Our NV Energy agreements treat both infrastructure corridors as well as private property within 1,000 feet. The overarching narrative for this item is most federal employees that deal with fuel and fire are laid off for the fall, winter, and spring when there's a need for fuels management work, as well as our folks are typically hitting federal boundaries and then stopping because we don't have authorization or mechanism to do work on the other side of the boundary. So the Forest Service has seen the success of our program, and they reached out asking if they can essentially contract to us to do fuels management work on their side of the boundary when it butts up against pre-planned projects.
Okay?
That's
So these are only interface areas.
correct.
So you're not going to come to my house and help me eliminate the brush out front of my house or the pine needles in my yard if I'm not in an interface area?
Not with this agreement.
Okay.
Like I said, NV Energy and Truckee Meadows funding exists to help with some of those things, like the green waste program, some curbside chipping options.
Yeah, but I still have to remove the material and bring it to you. That's what I'm referencing.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions, commissioners? Any questions, commissioners, on the phone? Okay,
No, thank you.
okay, all right. Commissioner Hill, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, sir. I move to approve the agreement between the U.S. Forest Service and Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District to perform federally funded fuels reduction projects with district staff and equipment. Federal funding utilized in this agreement not to exceed $150,000 annually.
Okay, so I have a motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Hill, second by Commissioner Herman. Is there any public comment on this item, Madam Clerk?
We have none.
Okay, I will close public comment, bring it back to the board. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Chief, for reining me in. Now, item 17. Commissioners and Fire Chief's announcements. Chief, do you have any other items?
I have none, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay, I'll go down the line. Commissioner Hill, do you have anything else? Commissioner Jung, District 3, do you have anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say to the fire chief and all of his staff, which includes people holding the hose on the line, but also the support staff. I know this is a heady and crazy time for us here, and I'm just so grateful, and I know my constituents are grateful that you're keeping us apprised, as Commissioner Hill said, of all the happenings as we hopefully, are closing out the most dangerous part of our fire season. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Herman?
Yes, I just want to re-thank everyone involved in this fire organization. You are just truly amazing. I think you saved Tahoe. Thank you.
Okay. All right, and I too appreciate the response. Thank you so much. And on the barking of the dog, we will answer the door and take us to item number 18. Madam Clerk, this is our final public comment, or Chief, rather, public comment. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. This is public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. The district will also hear public comment during individual action items. With
Okay.
comment limited to 3 minutes.
No one
Perfect.
has signed in.
Okay. Is there anyone wishing to speak at this time? Seeing none, I will close public comment. I want to thank everyone for coming out today. Without objection, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Great meeting.